We are having in Nairobi and across the country in regards to road safety, which is one of the biggest robbers of people's lives in this country, in terms of the lack of safety thereof, which has been one of the reasons why many people have died on our roads. And just to get into context this, let's take a look at some of the figures regarding the deaths on the roads. We look at just the deaths, not even the injuries, and this is the latest between January 1st and July 22nd. And now pedestrians, last year between 1st January and 22nd July was 605 who died on the roads. But this year, as at 22nd July, from 1st January are 639. So we see the number of pedestrians who've died have increased rather. Drivers have gone up by one person from 174 to 175. Then we have passengers going from 382 to 367. That's a drop in terms of the number of those who've died. Then we have motorcyclists moving from 267 to 313, the boda operators, that is. Then the pillion passengers are moving from 132 to 146, an increase in the number of those who have died. Then we have the pedal cyclists, that's the people who have their bicycles, and we have those are moving from 28. I've actually stayed unchanged at 28, the same number. Nonetheless, those are still deaths as much as not increasing. Now, the total number of people who have died on the roads, according to NTSA statistics, have moved from 6,572 in 2017, that's January to 22nd July, to 7,180. That's over 500 additional deaths on the roads, despite the number of measures that have been taken and the action that has been promised by the government and even by the private sector in terms of their own part. And so this brings to focus the conversation we're meant to be having here in studio, which gives some sort of context into our discussion. And I'm now joined by Simon Kimutia, the chairman of Matatu Owners Association, as well as Timothy Kelly, the business development manager of AA Kenya, who have been championing a lot of road safety matters. And thank you for joining us, gentlemen. But Kimutia, when you see those statistics, what's your first response?
Well, it's saddening. These are lives we would have saved. About 80% of crashes on our roads could have been avoided. And 20% could have just happened and called them accidents. The rest could be crashes. And it is saddening because they can be avoided. When I say they can be avoided, it's that it's human error. A very big percentage of crashes on our roads are because of either speed or carelessness. So this contributes heavily. And then innocence also. There is no education. We've seen that the pedestrians who are involved in, who have been knocked are very many. Because you remember when I was in school, in the curriculum, students would be taught even before you cross the road, you look left, you look right, and then you look left again before you cross. I don't know why such were removed from, being an educative tool to students who would exactly do the same. But now it's one for himself.
Timothy, what is your feeling when you see those kind of statistics, considering that we've had a lot of campaigns, especially yourselves have been having campaigns in regards to road safety. We've had a lot of measures from the government's end. Matatu owners have been saying they will do their part over the years, but we're still seeing the number of people dying on the roads increasing.
Dan, this is very sad, in terms of the lives that we've lost, and the most saddening part is to see that the number is increasing year on year. And I think we all have a responsibility to ensure that there is safety on our roads. There's been a lot of finger pointing, and I'm happy with Kimutia here. A lot of people have been blaming the Matatu drivers and then being irresponsible themselves. A lot of people think that it is the government to do this, or it is the Matatus to do this, or it is another body, NTSA, to do this or the other. But if we all took responsibility and say that road safety begins with me, and if you look at the human error or the behaviors of drivers, contribute to about over 80% of all the crashes that we have. If we could be able to change our attitude about whose responsibility it is to be safe on the road, and not blame the police, not blame NTSA, not blame one another, because blaming one another doesn't give a solution. It only gets us to the statistics that we are seeing that are really saddening.
But Kimutia, a number of times your people have been accused, and quite candidly, rightly so, in regards to being a menace on the roads.
Well, there's always a place to blame, or there's always somebody to blame. And he's put it correctly. What we need to do should be to every person who is either walking, using a vehicle, a motorbike, or a cyclist, that the responsibility of their safety is in their hands. It is a sole responsibility to every individual. One is that the statistics are very clear. There's been tremendous improvement in public transport crashes on our roads, especially when the rules were put in place. And you'll find that the speed governors has helped crashes. Before, we used to see red paint on our newspapers or dailies that there is a crash and very many people have died on public transport. But today you can see the paradigm is a shift already to border borders. And this is worrying. The trend is really on an upright, getting on. And this is attributed greatly because of none of knowledge. You don't have information. Though I heard some people being interviewed asked whether they know even how to read signs. And you'll find that in border, you will have your motorbike now. You train by evening, you're carrying passengers. And they don't understand any sign on the road or even how to handle the equipment itself. So I think what needs to happen is that there should be a very candid education on road safety. We don't have any. As I think there's been focus on public transport in terms of Matatus so much, and an area which is growing now is areas of great concern. There are very many crashes involving saloon vehicles. Apparently, a Matatu moves with maybe 14 passengers or 33 passengers or 60 passengers. So when there is a crash, there are many people who get hurt. But the individual vehicles, there is a lot of excitement. I think Kenyans are very abrasive. Most of them have bought vehicles and they want to, show off that I have my car, me, myself, and my car. And I think what is lacking here is proper education, proper training, and people to have information on road safety. All right.
And yourselves as AA, you've been doing some campaigns in terms of, I've been saying, excuse me, because I've been talking about awareness in terms of and road safety. But some of this is actually an issue of attitude in regards to the mentality that people have. How do we change that attitude? Because, for instance, I'll give an example of myself, and I've shared it here before, is that I use borders, but I will always insist on wearing a helmet and the reflector jacket. But there's some border operators who will refuse. There's some who see me and ignore me from where I stay because they know me. They've marked me as a guy who is petty. There's a mentality. How do we change that mentality?
I think the first thing we need to do, like I've said, is that we need to think of road safety as me. I'll give you a short story that I was told some time back, that somebody had a big trailer and they refused to give way to a small car, and there was a crash because the small car had a right of way. And when there was a crash, it was fatal, but the guy did not wait to see what happened, so he left and he ran and went to hide at home. As is characteristic of some of these things when they happen, only for him to reach home and find that people are mourning. And when he asked what has happened, he was told that his cousin has died in a crash. What he didn't realize is that he killed his own cousin out there in the road, because we normally think it's very far from us until you're affected, until somebody close to you, until your beloved is involved in an accident and you have to go to the burial and all that kind of thing. That's when you begin to look at it as something that is very close to you. So one of the things we need to begin to look at is each one of us, without pointing fingers, without blaming, is to say, I as a pedestrian, I need to take caution in terms of being safe on the road. I as a driver, do I have the skills that are necessary for me to be able to manage this car? Am I aware of my road conditions? And some of the campaigns and a lot of things that we are doing is to promote road safety and the interests of motorists on the road, and is to say, when you are on that road, are you aware of the road conditions? Are you aware that you need to drive differently at night than you would drive during the day? Are you aware that the weather conditions have changed and maybe the roads are slippery? Are you aware that, like now we are going to, I think end of this week and beginning of next week, most schools are closing. We need to be aware that there will be a lot of kids on the road. There will be a lot of people moving around, pedestrians. How does that then affect our behavior on the road? If I am a driver, if I used to go at a certain speed in the estates, how is that supposed to inform me to change that behavior? The moment you look at it, and these kids you're talking about, they're not kids that are somewhere else. These are your kids. Imagine this is your daughter crossing the road. Imagine this is your son crossing the road. So it's our responsibility, and most of the things that we are doing is to ensure that people understand that it is their safety that comes first. Another thing I'll talk about, and I'll just mention, is to say, even when we talk about the way we maintain our vehicles, the way where we get our spare parts, you can imagine a scenario whereby you have bought a house that is worth 11 million or 15 million as the going prices for houses nowadays. And yet you cannot invest in a genuine brake pad for your vehicle. And that's where you carry yourself and you carry your entire family. And with the full knowledge that should anything happen and you need the vehicle to stop at a certain distance, it will not stop because the vehicle has fake parts that you've used as brake pads. So these are some of the things that we need to look at and begin to appreciate that road safety is our responsibility.
Kimutia.
Now, I want to say that these figures that are shown here are only figures that when an accident occurs. There are more deaths than what has been posted because there is no follow-up on serious injuries that could have been made by the accident. Yeah, some succumb maybe after 1 week or so. And you find that there's been a lot of, I would say there's not been any attention, and yet it is a monster. When we lose over 3,000 people, it's like a whole school that has population of 3,000 people dying at a go. And, the attention has gone so much into AIDS and HIV, and there is nothing that is sensitive about educating people on road crashes. And yet it doesn't cost much to educate people, as opposed to buying drugs and telling people about HIV and AIDS. What's difficult, because I'm sure so much is lost in terms of, you see, most people who get hurt and who die in road accidents are within the age bracket of 25 and 40 and maybe 45. There's an active economic age for every individual who contributes so much to the economic growth of the country. So you find that there's been neglect on road safety issues. NTSA should be busy preaching road safety everywhere, but we don't see them. We only see mostly engaged with the Automobile Association and other institutions that actually, which should have been led by NTSA. And it's their mandate to ensure that our roads are safe. And we've seen also luxury in compliance and enforcing the law. Our roads are known very well for practicing corruption. We know very well that most, I don't say all, most public traffic officers on our roads are not there just to do their work, to enforce the law. They're there to collect revenues for themselves. And this is one of the biggest contributor. Nobody checks whether the tires are worn out, especially involving public transport. It's saddening because we investors in public transport have invested. We cannot move with our vehicles where they go. We expect traffic police enforcement officers to be doing this on our behalf, to be making sure that these people behave, to be making sure that those who violate the law are prosecuted. Apparently it doesn't happen. And this is because of the form in which the business is done. It's liquid, and every time the attraction is the money. It's not enforcing the law.
All right, and we'll get in. We've had a lot of feedback by the Wananchis. Some feeling that this situation is as is, and we almost cannot really help it. Unfortunately, we've had Matatu owners even in Eldoret, saying, defending themselves, saying they are easily victims of targeting when it comes to that. And we'd spoken about that, but we've seen in the statistics that we had, the largest number of people who have died are pedestrians. Mr. Kimutia, what's your view on that?
Well, I think, as I had indicated earlier, people don't have the knowledge on when to close, or how to close the road. When it comes to, earlier on looking at left and looking at right, checking whether they are vehicles. You find somebody comes with their own stress, with their own way of thinking, they just cross the road. Some even ignorantly see a vehicle and they say, igari kuna brakes. Or who driver ananiona. This kind of attitude. I think we need all to change the attitude. And, there's got to be an education. NTSA should go visiting areas, especially in Nairobi. Jogoo Road is notorious area, and people crossing roads from where there's even bridges. They don't want to go through the footbridge. They just want to cross the road, and they're mutilated by vehicles.
So most of these cases are like what you're saying, are largely people who are being, you know, not as concerned about the safety when they're crossing roads, for instance. Footbridges are there. We've seen many cases where there's somebody running under a footbridge. Some had previously, you know, claimed that security, but some of them have been cleaned and they're safe, but people will still insist on crossing the road.
We Kenyans are we're so much in a hurry every moment. You want to get to the other end, you don't want to go through the footbridge. You want to cross quickly, you think you can run faster than a vehicle that is coming. And at the same time, we have problems when people get, you know, to go to their, you know, leaving their places of social life, walking into their houses. When they look at the vehicle coming, maybe the lights look like they are very far, they are hit. So you'll find that pedestrians need to be educated on how to cross the road. That's one thing that I've seen. They do not know how to cross the road. You can even see in Nairobi here. A zebra crossing, and the light says a green for a motorist to go, but they're still crossing. Why? We have, number one, we have completely become disobedient. We have become rebellious on laws and regulations that can put us at safety. And we have, you know, like mtu ananiona, and when you even pump into your brakes, they even can abuse you. And so I think there needs a proper coordination on road safety, and we're glad that some institutions have stepped in to help, you know, those who are either moving by either walking across the road or besides the road, have come out to educate them. The government needs to put more effort and put in a budget to educate people on the same.
Timothy, we've seen conversation about giving refresher courses for the drivers who already existent. We have never had that kind of a system generally. You get your driver's license in 1960, you just renew it without any proof of your capacity to drive. Over the years, probably your eyesight has gone down, it's become worse. There's nothing to show that some of the drivers who are the most experienced are, you know, roadworthy, if we put it that way. Do we have any kind of resistance, or some, no, not even resistance, do you have any kind of people who are feeling that they would actually want to go through refresher courses?
Yes, Dan. We actually run what we call learner driver. That is when you begin to just do driving. And I think one of the things that is supposed to be done to address road safety is the skill of the driver. And like you've rightly put it, having a holder of a driving license for many years does not make you a more experienced driver. We normally do what we call driver assessments. So when you come, we do assessments, and then based on the results of the assessment, we'll be able to recommend the kind of training that you need to go through. You could have started driving a small car, and now you want to graduate and begin to drive a big car, or what we call now the Class B. We need to do an assessment for you so that we can ascertain your skill. Because sometimes when you look at pedestrians, the way they've been knocked down, like I said, every one of us has a responsibility to it. One of the things I'll tell you is that before I started driving, I used to have this assumption that the driver has seen me. And I used to have this assumption that this is a new car, so it must be having brakes. You know, until when you sit on that seat and you're the one driving and you realize, I had not seen that guy crossing.
So the guys who Kimutia was talking about.
The guys who Kimutia was talking about, gari inaniona, driver, and aniona gari nimpya, it must be having brakes. That kind of an assumption is not, it's part of what leads to this particular death that we are seeing. And then something else, I don't think we have a platform, and I think this is where the media can also come in partnership to help, to say how much information does the pedestrian out there have about the highway code, about where to cross the road, about what they need to do. And sometimes we, like Kimutia has rightly put it, we are in a hurry and we are not going anywhere. At times you even look at drivers competing on the road, and they don't know each other, they don't know where the other driver is going, and they part ways after the next junction. but they were really competing. I did not want you to go before me for some reason. And at some point you feel like, I think that's not entirely a bad quality for us as Kenyans. I wish we could harness that energy and channel it elsewhere for production in terms of that competitiveness and that ability to want not to be left behind. But I think there's a lot of ignorance out there on the public about road safety, especially for pedestrians. And it's most of them, especially given that they are school-going kids, it needs to be entrenched in the curriculum. Issues to do with road safety. There's something we are doing about partnering with Kenha about what we call the traffic parks for kids, where kids will be taken there for a whole afternoon and they'll be taken through, you know, that traffic park, and they'll be told this is how you cross the road, this is how you take care of yourself when you're walking on the pedestrian path, and those are some of the things that we need now more partners to be able to collaborate with to get that information out there for pedestrians to know what exactly they need to do.
But you know, you've mentioned something that happens quite a lot with mostly young people, where we have people, you've talked about those people who want to race on the roads, but they don't know each other. But we have those who actually do it deliberately, and sometimes our bypasses are the culprits. We've heard of cases of people doing it even on Mombasa Road at the very wee hours of the morning when there is less traffic. Mr. Kimutia, what's your view on this in terms of those people who deliberately, and you know, it becomes like, I mean, for a man especially, it becomes like a bragging point for, I floored my speedometer. You
know, I've seen this in many towns, especially with the Asian community. Young boys who have just gotten their licenses want to prove that their vehicles, the tools are, you know, they're more strong than the others. And this become a very big risk because somebody says, you got to get to Westlands roundabout and back to see how your machine pulls. This should end. It's terrible because because at that time you have nothing that controls you. You're just thinking about this person who's about to overtake you. So in doing so, you're fast endangering yourself and other road users. And I think parents should be told that this should not happen. I've seen it so much in Nairobi. I've seen it in other towns where, you know, they test machines. And, you know, machines, these are powerful machines and they'll kill you without knowing. So I think what needs to happen is, even in border, for instance, it has to be regulated. I think it was ignored initially, though it's become a very important economic tool. It's facilitating economic activities, but it's causing mayhem. There's so many people who've lost their limbs, there are people who've lost their lives, and it's because none of these boys have been exposed to proper training. And without proper training, and there's no regulations governing the operations, what happens? Definitely, there are going to be deaths. You'll find that a border overtakes you. One day I opened my door from the left when my driver stopped for me, and somebody literally went away with my door, overtaking from the left side. It is very dangerous, and I think what should happen is that there should be mechanisms put in place to allow these young men to train and be able to know the highway code, be able to know the traffic act, be able even to know the signs of the road. Most of them don't care. They don't stop at red lights. Even when policemen stop them, he'll take a panya route and you'll never get him. And you know, this is why they have to be grouped in probably corporate entities, like putting them in a SACCO. And when anybody misbehaves, the SACCO is told to provide the person to appear and be taken to court for prosecution. Because you'll realize that the lives lost is going up each day. Yes. And I also would wish to say that the government should not have waived duty on these motorcycles. They should make it difficult.
But what's the balance between trying to create an enabling environment for those who want to do business with borders and that?
You see, life is more precious. Would we rather lose many lives and have people prospering? One is that it has to be made. Actually, today, you realize in most communities that young men are telling their parents to sell part of their land to buy a motorcycle. One is that they don't have the proper gear. They don't have the helmets, they don't have the clothes. Within 10 years, the guy has got respiratory problems. I mean, you can't have proper breathing. You could be having asthma, you could be having all sorts of respiratory diseases. And they don't realize now. And it's become so easy. That's why you see the registration of those vehicles in a month is in terms of maybe hundreds of thousands. So to stop this is to make it a bit expensive for them to operate. And I think that would be the only remedy to it. And those which will remain provide rules and regulations and also proper training for them to know that they're using the road and they must be trained before they go to the road.
Okay, and just before, you have a quick response. Let's get a quick response before we take a break.
Yes, now that we talk about training, I think, because that's one of the things that we do, we have reached out to the borders, or motorcyclists, called borders in this country. And what we've done is that we're trying to create partnerships with all the constituencies, and we've tried to reach out to all the 290 constituencies, because we know they do have what we call Constituency Development Fund, and we've gotten some very positive responses from the members of parliament in certain regions where they've given us young men who are already operating borders, but they have not gone through any proper training, so that we take them through the training, through their sponsorship in empowering the youth. And I think that's one of the things that I would encourage any person out there who is riding a motorbike and they have not gone through proper training for their own safety and the safety of every other person, to seek to get trained at a proper training institution, so that they can get to know the highway code and get to know what to do on the road.
All right, we'll get back to the